The UK Chancellor of the Exchequer has delivered his autumn budget statement to the House of Commons, and he has admitted the country could be headed into another recession. There was other bad news for George Osborne after the Office of Budget Responsibility slashed growth forecast, and he was forced to admit government borrowing in 2014 to 15 will be more than double his forecast of £37 billion. To give you expert insight into the British economy, I'm joined by Simon Kirby from the National Institute of Economic and Social Research. Simon, how has Mr Osborne managed to get his sums so wrong concerning the structural deficit?
What we need to remember is he's trying to decompose, the Chancellor is trying to decompose the deficit into its structural and cyclical components, which are unobservable. The Office of Budget Responsibility, when talking about the Chancellor hitting his fiscal mandate to balance the structural budget deficit by a certain period in time, is giving a probability distribution around that. So they're actually highlighting uncertainty around the likelihood of the Chancellor hitting his particular target. Now, the Chancellor was talking about hitting it within the parliamentary term, but his actual fiscal mandate is a rolling 5-year window, so he's continuously moving forward. And although he's not hitting it when he said he was going to over the last couple of years, or as he's been saying over the last couple of years, he is certainly still going to be hitting it over the medium term, given the scale of austerity that the UK currently has in plan.
The UK was one of the first countries to introduce really tough austerity measures, but now there's talk of actually extending it. Is there more flexibility in the public sector for more cuts?
We need to bear in mind that when we're talking about further cutbacks, this probably does mean a reduction in the delivery of frontline services. We also shouldn't rule out further tax increases as well. There's always a possibility that in actual fact the deficit is reduced more quickly than we're currently expecting, and we can see this from the probability distributions that the Office of Budget Responsibility publish around their forecasts. It's not in all one direction that things get materially worse. It could be that there's some positive outcomes. So I wouldn't necessarily say that it's the right thing to talk about further austerity now for a point 5 years in the future. We're moving in the right direction with regards to fiscal consolidation over the medium term, and I think that's what we should focus on for the future.
We had this announcement earlier in the week about the government spending money on infrastructure and also incentives for business. Is this just a case of the government moving money around rather than making fresh funds available?
That does seem to be the case, that they're actually just shifting around money. You have to also bear in mind that infrastructure spending or capital expenditure is not included in the primary fiscal mandate. That's simply current expenditure with regards to that. So it doesn't affect the Chancellor's fiscal mandate. You also have to bear in mind that the numbers that have been talked about, although are welcome, are relatively small in the grand scheme of with regards to the size of the UK economy. So when they talk about $5 billion of public sector expenditure over the next 5 years, they are talking over the next 5 years. So if you average that out, $1 billion a year is not very much for an economy that's about 1.6 trillion. With regards to the private sector, it seems to be, in principle, this is an approach they want to take, and as yet, nothing has been signed. So it's, I suppose, at the moment you might want to call it an aspiration of government, and it would be very welcome, but we'll have to wait and see what happens with regards to that 20 billion investment from the private sector pension funds that the government has been talking about.
Okay, thank you, Simon. Wednesday will be extremely interesting in the UK, with 2 million workers expected to strike, and it's likely to be the toughest test yet for the coalition government. We'll keep on top of all the developments here on Dukascopy TV. Goodbye for now.